Our chapel speaker this morning is Kelly Knouse, and Kelly is the next-gen pastor at Idlewild Baptist Church in Tampa, Florida. He's married to his wife, Tara, and they have 6 kids, and one of their children, Cade, is a freshman here at Carson-Newman and plays on the baseball team, and Kelly is a fantastic speaker, and I don't really want to build him up too much, but he's a great speaker when it comes to college students. So I'm very excited that you're going to get to hear from him today. It was when Kelly was playing baseball at Liberty University, another Christian school, that God called him into ministry. And so I tell you that because you never know what the Lord might have for your life and that you might discover while you're here at Carson-Newman. And it may be that God would call you into full-time ministry. It may be that God would call you that through your vocation, whether it's coaching or teaching or nursing, that He wants you to make an incredible impact on this world for Jesus Christ. And so I am thankful that you're here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that you have to have all of these great folks, this faculty that's investing in you, and these speakers who come to chapel who are investing in you and who are challenging you to live your life expecting great things for God. So will you guys help me welcome Kelly Knouse to preach to us this morning?
Man, I'm honored to be with you guys. As John mentioned, man, I serve at a church in Tampa, Florida, and I actually have 7 children, and that is both an introductory statement and a prayer request all at the same time. And man, we have 6 biological children, and our oldest by birth is a freshman here, and then we adopted one out of foster care who is 21, almost 22, and so it's just been a real blessing. Let me say this to y'all, man, I'm honored to be with you guys. It truly is an honor to be with you guys and just a part of the work that God's doing on this campus and hopefully in your heart. You've been walking through the book of Ephesians in your chapel services as you've been here these last couple of weeks. And I want to invite you to Ephesians Chapter 3. And just in a few moments, I want us to press into, man, one of the most powerful passages, not only in that chapter, in that letter, but one that's had an incredible impact just on my own personal life. There's kind of this crescendo effect of Ephesians chapter 3 that builds to this verse that many of you, if you've grown up in church world, could recite from memory. And it's in that verse 20, right at the end of that chapter, and it comes at the end of this prayer that Paul writes out for us, where he simply says this: "Now to Him," speaking of God, "who is able to do exceedingly abundantly or immeasurably more beyond what we can ask or imagine." And then he tags on this little phrase: "according to the power that's working within us for His glory and His renown." To God, this God who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly and more than not just what we can ask, or not even just those thoughts that we think sometimes, but what we can, our wildest imagines. He says, I want to blow your mind of what I can do in and around your life. But here's the cool part. It's according to the power that's already within you. As we walk through this chapter this morning, really just a handful of verses, and I think about just this building to this one thought, this God of more that's able to do exceedingly abundant. I want to ask you just a simple question this morning. As you're nearing the end of this school year, you're kind of already, is this kind of the last quarter? I know it's semesters, but we're past spring break. I mean, you're marching to the finish line, right? Some of you are seniors, you're literally marching to the finish line. Let me ask you a question. As you survey just the last year, as you survey your last few years as being a student at this university around godly people, incredible professors, powerful chapter services, would you define and mark your spiritual life at present as something that you would say, you know what, right now I'm experiencing more of Jesus than I did a month ago? That my spiritual life is marked by this God who's able to do exceedingly abundantly. And you know what? I've been somebody that, man, I'm experiencing that. I'm getting a little more. Like not more just academia, not just more, activity and busyness, but you know what? My life is marked by more joy, more peace, more hope in the future that God provides. Because that is what Paul is building to in this verse. As we walk through, man, just these thoughts, I want to lift out really just 3 questions I want us to ask of our spiritual life this morning. Just 3 questions I want us to ask personally as we survey this. If you've been on this journey, Ephesians Chapter 3, let me give you the quick flyover of this letter. Paul's writing this letter to a group of believers in this church of Ephesus, but there's 6 chapters. We've placed those in later, but there's this incredible dividing line right in the middle of this letter. If you were just to sit and study it in one sitting, you would come to discover this, that chapters 1 through 3 are really heavy on doctrine. In other words, all these things that Paul is writing to us to say, man, this is what you need to know or believe about God. And then he shifts gears into the second half, chapters 4 through 6. It's not just about what we believe and know about God, but then he starts to really press in on the practical. This is how you are to behave. This is how you are to function based on all that you believe. So he says, man, listen, the first half of the letter, what we believe. The second half, man, how we behave. The first half is all of this, information of God. And then, man, the second half, all this activity. And can I just say something for free this morning? I think for many of us, especially if you've grown up in church, we've had a tendency to define Christianity in one of those 2 camps. And you were saying, man, if I were to answer that question, am I experiencing more of Jesus? Most of us would give our spiritual resume of, well, look how much more I know about God. Or, look how much I'm doing, and more than I'm doing for God. And P.S., those are good things, by the way. But if we live isolated in just those 2 categories, man, we can get into one camp of just, man, this is all that I need to know, and I can move really hard into this legalistic mode. Or man, this is all that I'm doing. I can get into this real liberal mode. And it's like, and what Paul does is right in the middle of these 2 sections. It's almost as if he pauses and says, let me just write to you this prayer that I have that will help you connect all that you know and all that you do. It sort of serves as this connective tissue to help you to say, man, this is where the spiritual life really comes to life for us. This prayer is what I'm hoping to connect all the information as we get to know God and all these things we attempt to do for God to experience the God of more in our life. The presence and the power of God. The way that he's truly defined it. Because in essence, the entire letter of Ephesians is really, the theme is the power to live the Christian life. And it's here in this passage, man, that he gives it to us. Let's look at it together, all right? Starting in verse 14, here's this prayer he writes. He says, for this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. That according to the riches of his glory, you may be strengthened with power through his Spirit, where? In your inner being. He said, man, I want to unlock some things for you. Let me just ask you, here's the first question as he prays this kind of first prayer of something on the inside of you, not something that you know and it's not something you do, but something deep in your heart on the inside of you is simply this. I'm praying that you experience the power of God in your life. Here's the question. Is the power of God just a theological idea or a practical experience for you? Is the power of God just this concept that we would agree to? Yeah, God is able, but is it a present reality in our daily walk? As John mentioned, I'm a Liberty guy, all right? It's that other small little dinky Christian school. It's got nothing on y'all, but I'm a Liberty guy. And I went there and played college baseball. I'll never forget my first semester there. I went there and played baseball. The first semester, any baseball players in the house? Let me see you. Where you at? Athletes in the house. Any of the athletes? They make y'all sit together? What's up? All right. Any other athletes? Come on. Listen, man, baseball, that spring season is go time. Fall is like all the workouts. You feel me? I mean, it's that grind. man, those first couple weeks on campus, these off-season workouts, and man, we at the time the athletic training facility was smaller, and we were sharing with all of these other teams and basketball guys, and we're scheduling in and around here. And you would walk into this athletic training facility onto the second floor. You would come to a balcony, and then down the stairs it opened up this big room with all the free weights. And one of the days in this fall, as we're getting ready to work out, we go in and the football team is finishing their workout. Well, it was the offensive and defensive linemen, and they were doing something that was simply called max day. Anybody familiar with that? It's that day where you max. I'm going to see how much weight I can get off the bar, whether it's squat and they're bench pressing. And we're standing, baseball guys, waiting our turn for these guys to finish. And that wasn't an uncommon thing. But what was unique about this is that, man, these guys were just getting after it. I'm talking like, man, it was just testosterone so thick, you could just like step through it. I mean, guys are standing up just yelling at each other because apparently when you yell at somebody, it gets you more fired up to like lift more. I don't know the makeup of that, but I mean, they're chest bumping, they're going crazy. And I'm watching all this stuff, and I notice on the floor over here is our starting center, and he's under the bench by himself, and he's warming up. And can I just tell y'all something? He's got more plates on here. I don't even know how to do the math, but he's over here just warming up, thumping this thing. And now this was a large individual, by the way. And I say large, it's relative. I mean, he was like 5'6" by 5'6". I mean, he was just a mountain of a man. I mean, I don't even think he had a neck. It was just shoulder and head. I mean, he just walked around. You walk behind him and his calves looked like somebody snuck up behind him and like shoved basketballs in there. I mean, it was just this mountain of a guy. And I'm a brand new student at this campus. I'm thinking, bro, this is our starting center. He gets up from warming up. He goes to a strength and conditioning coach and says, I'm ready. They start piling on more weights, and he gets under the bench press to try to do one rep of the max that he can do. I asked one of the teammates up there as we're watching the baseball team, I go, bro, how much is that? He goes, dude, that's 505 pounds. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? This is going to be good. We get to watch this. He gets on this bench, gets under the rack, takes the bar off, and drops it down to his chest. And with one motion and this sound, I'll never forget, he just goes, and he exhales and just lifts it, puts it back on the rack. Dude, and everybody goes crazy. 505 pounds. This is awesome. Well, at that same moment, I look up and I notice across the back of the room, there's all of these banners with these different records from previous athletes through the history of the school and all of like the highest achievement in all of these different categories. And there's the bench press record for the history of the school and all the football players, and it was 505 pounds. And I'm looking at my teammates, I go, bro, you realize what we just witnessed? This wasn't just like an incredible feat of strength. This guy just tied the school record. And at that same moment, all of this is hitting me. I look back down and I look at him, talk to the strength and conditioning coach, and he goes, put on some more weight. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm ready to start, chest bumping. Like, this is gonna be awesome, Put on some more weight. He throws on 515 pounds and he gets back under the rack. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, this is gonna be a great moment, right? Like either way, we win. You understand what I'm saying? Like we're gonna watch history or he's gonna die trying. Either way, gonna be entertaining. You know what I mean? He gets under the rack, drops it on his chest, same motion, same sound. This exhale just lifts it, puts it back on the rack. At this time, I mean, even us baseball guys, we ain't even done nothing. We're high-fiving each other like, yeah, because we're a part of this historic moment. It's my first month on campus. And I remember having this thought leaving that weight room that day. I'm thinking, bro, this is the starting center on our football team. Like, this is the guy that every single offensive play, the ball starts in his hands. He is the guy responsible for leading this front line of pressing forward these 11 men down the field. Bro is the strongest guy in the history of the school. Our football team's got to be legit. I go to the first home game like 2 weeks later. Y'all, we get blown out by like 40 from a school I can't even spell. It's like Quinnipiac or something. I'm like, bro, who is that? I go the next week, we get beat by 30. And I'm watching these two games, and in the middle of the field, I'm watching the strongest guy in the history of our school, this starting center, getting pushed around and thrown around like a rag doll. And y'all, it didn't compute to me. I started thinking, man, this guy has all of this power, and yet it's yielding so few results when it comes to the field. He has all of this power, but it's not translating to production on the field when it really matters, when it's game time. And can I just tell y'all something? Man, we read verses and we talk about this God who is able, and that what we possess, that, man, we are more than conquerors in Jesus. And yet, man, we have all this power. And why is it that we aren't experiencing any of it ourselves? It's producing so few results. Do you remember the end of that verse? Now to him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly, according to what? The power that's in us. Hey, if you know Jesus, you've had a relationship with Jesus that began one time in your life. Can I just hear you say amen with some conviction? Amen. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead resides in you. So the question is simply this: is the power of God just a concept, a biblical truth, or is it a present reality? Is it something that we experience when we're facing just the emotional weight that we carry from past hurts? Is the power of God present in that space in your life? Is the power of God present in that space, man, where we struggle with that same sin that we've confessed, that same area of just temptation that over and over that we feel bad about and that we recommit? Man, is the power of God present in that space? Because God says, I'm more than able to do beyond what you can imagine. But here's the truth. It's not a matter of God's lacking in power. It's not that it's not available. It's really a matter of, do we choose to access it? And can I just tell you, when we access the power of God, something has to happen. It's a recognition that I don't have enough power. For his to rise, mine needs to release. I love John 3:30 that says, he must increase and I must what? Decrease. Yeah. It's not that God's holding out on you. Maybe it's that we're the ones that are holding out on him. So he says, man, listen, is this power of God a present reality? Here's the second question I want you to see from the text. And it's simply this: is Jesus just a resident in your heart, or is he president of your heart? Is he the undisputed owner of every corner, of every place and every space of your life? Look back in the text, if you would. Verse 16, it says this, that, man, according to this power, he wants to strengthen you. In verse 17, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. If you write or highlight or circle or underline your Bible, just single out that word dwell and circle around that. That Christ would dwell in your heart through faith. It's this concept, this idea, this picture that Christ would make our hearts his home. And not that we get more of Jesus, that we're just giving Jesus more access to say, God, you own it all. God, I want you to feel at home and dwell in every space of my life. I told you I have 7 children. My middle daughter, her name is McKenna. And McKenna is, her middle name is Joy, and that is, man, she's McKenna Joy. She's full of joy. She's that type of person that whatever she thinks she's gonna say, and there's very few seconds in between that process and no filter, you know what I'm saying? And she's a blast, but sometimes you're like, McKenna, you got to get it together, you know? And when she was in 2nd grade, we transferred her from this little small Christian school that was literally kind of in our backyard to this brand new public school that was being built down the street. And there was a lot of reasons for that. One was like, it was just stinking expensive, all right? But 2, like the school was smaller, this brand new public school, man, a lot of her friends were going to. And as we first started talking about it, she was really excited. So we go, and like after the first month or 2 of being there, she starts getting in trouble. She's been a great kid up to this point, no trouble in class, but she's starting to get notes home from the teacher. We're having some behavioral issues, and we couldn't figure it out. Well, finally, the teacher calls and she says, listen, McKenna's, your 2nd grader, man, she's having some challenges at school, and you're probably just gonna have to address this behavior. So what'd she do? Well, she stole some stuff from class today. I'm thinking, what is a 2nd grader stealing from class? And she says, well, we have these like little toys and, that we pull out. They're like Happy Meal toys. We'll pull out kind of in between to give the kids a break, and she's been stealing them, right? And so I'm like, McKenna, were you starting a business, selling them on eBay? What are you doing in 2nd grade? So we go home and start talking to her, but this wasn't the first thing. This has been a pattern. And so, man, we bring her into our room and get her kind of away from the kids to have this conversation. And man, she's a lot of fun, but man, she breaks easy. And so we started, man, McKenna, what is going on? Like this behavior cannot stop. And she instantly just starts bawling. Like she knows she's in trouble, right? You ever been around those people who just have that like ugly cry? I mean, it's just like uncontrolled. She's bawling. At that same time, my wife has to leave the room because another one of our kids needs something. So I'm in there just, having this conversation, trying to lay down the law, like, McKenna, we can't do this, You're gonna be stealing stuff. We've got to, get it together. And she's crying so hard, y'all. And I'm like, McKenna, you just need to understand there's consequences. So here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna let you choose the consequences. I'm either gonna take your blanket away for like 2 weeks. She had this blanket she slept with. I mean, it was like her deal. I said, or you can get a spanking right now, but one of the two is going to happen. She starts crying so uncontrollably that I start to laugh. Like, not intentionally. You ever have one of those moments like where it's supposed to be real serious and a friend of yours gives you a look or makes you chuckle, and like, because you know this is not an appropriate moment to laugh, it makes you have to laugh even harder? I'm in that space. And I'm trying to hold it together so much so that I'm like, I can't do this. I'm cracking up like in the most things. So I get up and I just leave the room, right? And I'm like, Knouse, you got to get it together. Tara's like, what are you doing? I'm like, babe, I just got to just kind of get myself together before I walk back in. Y'all, I go back into the room, and apparently McKenna had made her decision, because when I walk back in the room, she's now down off the bed and she's bent over like this waiting on me. I'm not joking. When I walked in and I saw that, I started cracking up even more. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked right back out of the room. And Tara, my wife, she goes, what are you doing? I said, baby, I cannot spank her like this. Like, can you imagine the mental and emotional trauma to a second grader that her dad's spanking her while laughing at her? Like, ha, 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 ha. I mean, dude, that'll jack you up for life. You know what I'm saying? And so I collect myself, I go back in there, and I'm like, just forget it. I just get back on the bed. Let's talk about this thing. And so I had to change tactics. And I'm like, all right, McKenna, let me just ask you some questions. Like, what is going on? Is there a reason? As I start asking questions about her heart, finally she breaks and she makes this statement. She goes, Dad, I just really want to go back to my own school. And it hit me. I said, McKenna, you remember all this stuff about this place why we went here? She said, yes, sir. She goes, but I just want to go back to my own school. And I said, I realized it in that moment. There was a rebellious spirit of her. It was almost like self-sabotaging the opportunity that she had because she wanted to be somewhere else. And I said, McKenna, I want you to look right here at me. I said, do you remember this decision we made together a few months ago? That a bunch of your friends were going there? Yes, sir. Do you remember all these different opportunities, the things that you want to do? I mean, like music and art classes and technology, cool stuff that other schools just wasn't able to give you and that you wanted? Yes, sir. I said, McKenna, the place you're at is your new school, and you need to hear me. It's the best option for you, and we're not going back. Now, it may sound a little harsh talking to a second grader, but I wanted her to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can't live in two places at once. And it was from that moment on, probably not from me, I was terrible parenting in that scenario, but the Spirit of God did something in her. In other words, McKenna, you have to bloom where you're planted. He says, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts. Listen, you can't experience the power of God if you're constantly trying to live back in that old life like the world. It doesn't work. He can't just be resident in your life. I prayed a prayer, Jesus lives in me, and now God do all this cool stuff while I keep doing all my old stuff. Is he resident or present? Does he have full authority and full access into every space and every corner of your life? He says, man, that's who I am. That's the God of more. But he says, man, there has to be a place in your life where you say, listen, it's not just wishful thinking, but it's deep conviction that this is where I'm going to live. I'm going to live for Jesus. It's a deep conviction. Can I just, for free, there's a difference between a belief and a conviction, right? A belief is something you hold true. A conviction is something that holds you. And you got to make a conviction in your heart that says, Jesus, I'm living the new life for you. All in, no reservation. I want to claim more from you, but I'm going to give more of me to you. All of me. Here's the last thought, and then we're going to bounce. Ready? He gives some great things, by the way. If you have time, read this text for yourself, because it wasn't just a prayer of power. This was a prayer of authority, but not authority like God's just talking about love and pressure or law and pressure. He's talking about love and peace. He says, man, and the love of God, man, that you can know personally how long and wide and high and deep is the love of God, he says in the next verse. And he says, and by the way, it comes with a peace that passes all understanding. He goes, that's the benefit of Christ dwelling in every access, all access to your heart. Here's the last question, we're done. Look in verse 19, and to know the love of God that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. I love that. All the fullness of God. That God doesn't want to hold out on you. He wants to bless you when you get to that crescendo verse of, man, now to him who's able to do. God's saying, listen, I'm able to do, and I want to give you all the fullness of God. The question is for us, man, are we feasting on the world, or are we feasting on Jesus? In other words, is Jesus my one and only, or is Jesus one of many that I'm going to feast on? Is he my one and only, or is he your one of many? Is he the add-on, man, at a Tuesday chapel, or because I go to Christian school, or is he the one and only? Man, I believe God wants to do a big work in your life. But it doesn't start by, man, I just got to know a bunch more. Now I got to go do a bunch more. There's something in my inner being for the power of God to rise. My own power's got to learn to release and say, Jesus, you've got it all. I've got a son, when he was little, he happens to be here and a student. Man, when our kids were little, I remember this. We've got a bunch of family that lives around in town, and man, at Christmas time, man, it's a party. I mean, we got family on both sides, tons of family. And when we first started having kids, I mean, we had like five kids in 6 years, did a little break, had another kid, and then another little break and adopted. It was crazy town. So like our first three were born, and we had like a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and like a newborn in our house. And all of our family's asking us, like, man, what do the kids want for Christmas? I'm like, I don't know. Half of them don't even speak yet. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what they want. So I told my wife, I said, man, all this pressure, we got to figure out what, to tell family. So I said, I got this idea. Let's load them up and let's go to Toys R Us and just see, back when Toys R Us was a place you could go and not an online experience. And I'm like, let's go just walk around and see what they gravitate towards. We'll put it on the list and we'll know what to tell people. I thought it was a brilliant idea. We load up, man, we get out the car, we go in the store, we grab the little shopping cart, man, we put the baby in the little seat thing. The other two are just jump on the side of the cart and we start pushing. We walk in and we go right in the middle of that store. It opens up and there's those little stanchion, like the little rope thing. And it takes you in a few feet and then it takes you around to the corner, over into the corner of the store. And then you have to kind of turn one more time and it opens up to the rest of the store. So we file in, we go to the corner, and over here in the corner is one of those Nerf basketball hoops, and it's got the net tied up in a knot with the ball sitting in it. And before we even get to the store, I mean, we're right in the entrance. My son, who's the oldest, who's about 3 or 4, hops off the cart, runs over to this Nerf basketball hoop, pops the ball out of the net, and starts trying to play with it. I'm looking at my wife going, put it on the list. This is a brilliant idea. I mean, we're not even here 2 minutes. Come on, I'm just crushing it. And I'm thinking this is just absolutely dad of the year brilliancy until I look at my son and I go, all right, put the ball back in the hoop. We got to get on the cart. Let's keep going. And he looks at me and he goes, no. My wife's like, dad of the year. I'm like, I know I'm an idiot. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. It was terrible. And so I'm trying to smooth it over. I'm like, son, we got to go. Like, put the ball in the hoop. At this point, he looks at me, his little simple, rebellious heart, and he grabs the rim and hangs on to it as if to say, if I'm going, this is going with me. You're going to have to pry my dead, cold hands off of it, And try not to make a scene. I'm like, son, we are getting out of here. Let go of the Nerf hoop, I'm grabbing his hand. I'm trying to take it off. And now he's getting upset because he doesn't understand. He starts crying. It starts that toddler chain reaction where now the other kid, they're all crying. We're 10 feet into the entrance of the store. My wife's just looking back at me like, smart one, I'm like, yes, ma'am. We literally didn't even go another step. I'm like, let's just get out of here. We loaded everybody back in the car and we just took off and went to the house. Here's the reason why I tell you that. Because it was in that moment, what my son didn't understand and didn't comprehend, but his dad knew, is that what he was hanging on to was preventing him from the opportunity of the tremendous blessings that awaited from his Father and what his Father would give him access to. And if he were to just let go of this one thing at the front of the store, what he didn't realize that he was going to walk every single aisle of the rest of that store. And everything he touched, I'm going to put that on a list. And there's a good chance there's a lot of that stuff you're going to get because our family rolls deep in South Florida, all right? You know what I've learned about the spiritual life of the God who says, I want to do exceedingly abundantly more? He won't give you more and he won't give me more if my hands are already full. But in the same posture that I would release my own life to God and say, God, I don't want you just to be resident, I want you to be present. Jesus, I don't want you to be one of many things I'm piling on to find happiness and security and satisfaction. I want you to be the one and only. So everything else I'm going to give to you. It's in this posture that I release is also the same posture that I'm ready to receive. The same posture that I'm ready to receive the power and the presence of God in my life. Listen, this Christian life, man, while it's rich in doctrine and deep in theology, and it's even heavy in debate in university settings like this where we can articulate and dive into the deep realities and the truths of who God is, man, that is powerful. At its core, it's childlike faith that says, yes, Dad, I'm trusting you. So here's the question this morning before we go. I'm praying we're done. Does your life look like this when it comes to Jesus? Ready to receive more, that I've released it all to him? Or are we still a little bit close-fisted? You ever had that moment in your life where you say, listen, I'm tired of trying. I'm going to release and give it all to Jesus. It's yours. My heart, my life, my future. It belongs to you, and I'm trusting in you that what you said, even in your word here in Ephesians, that I can't even fathom the height and the depth and the width of your love and the peace that's going to surpass all understanding. But God, I want to step into that, and I want to be ready to receive it. But it starts by you releasing and receiving Jesus. If you've received Jesus, it starts by saying, God, you have all access to every corner. What's that look like for you? Maybe God wants to do more for you in these last few weeks and months before you head off to summer. But he's not withholding. All the fullness of God is ready and waiting for you. Are you ready to receive it? It's our choice.